Imagine this, a cold, firelit cave deep in the Ice Age. The tribe gathers close for warmth, hunters sharpening stone blades while children doze in their mother's arms. But in the shadows sits someone different, a child with features unlike the rest, slower to move, gentler in expression. Today we might recognize Down syndrome, but thousands of years ago, when survival was brutal and every mouth to feed mattered, how were they treated? Were they abandoned? Or were they loved, protected, and even cherished? This mystery takes us back into the heart of prehistoric life, where survival and humanity collided in ways we're only beginning to understand. When we think of prehistoric life, the first image that comes to mind is often harsh survival, people struggling against freezing winds, predators, and hunger. It's easy to imagine that anyone who couldn't keep up was left behind. But the fossil record tells a very different story. Some of the most surprising discoveries in archaeology reveal that compassion and care existed long before written history. Take, for instance, the famous Shanidar cave in modern-day Iraq, where Neanderthals lived tens of thousands of years ago. Among the remains found there were individuals who had survived for years despite severe disabilities, missing limbs, blindness, or injuries that would have made hunting or foraging nearly impossible. Yet they lived long past the point where they could have survived alone. This suggests something profound. Their communities supported them. Welcome to Before Flame. If you enjoyed traveling back in time with me, don't forget to hit like and subscribe so you never miss the next journey into our ancient past. Now I'd love to hear from you. Tell me in the comments, where are you watching from and what time is it right now? It'll make me so happy to see our community connecting from all around the world. And most importantly, if this video make you just imagine the Stone Age, or actually feel what it was like to live as a caveman or cavewoman, share your thoughts below. I'm excited to read them all. Now, what does this mean for people with genetic conditions like Down syndrome in prehistory? While bones cannot directly reveal conditions such as trisomy 21, there are fossil finds of children with skeletal traits resembling developmental disorders who still lived for years. That in itself is evidence of sustained care. These individuals weren't abandoned at birth. They were fed, sheltered, and nurtured. This challenges the assumption that prehistoric people were purely survival-driven and without time for empathy. Instead, it reveals that compassion was woven into the very roots of humanity. Long before modern societies, humans understood that survival wasn't just about strength. It was about community. So the fossil record whispers to us, in the flicker of firelight, even the most vulnerable may have found love, protection, and a place within the tribe. Imagine being born into the Ice Age. The air is freezing, food is scarce, and every day is a gamble between life and death. For a child with Down syndrome, or any condition that slowed development, the odds of survival should have been almost zero. And yet, evidence shows some of these children did live, sometimes for years. Archaeologists have uncovered prehistoric remains of children who exhibited signs of developmental differences. In one case, researchers studying a 100,000-year-old Neanderthal child found skeletal traits suggesting disability. What's striking is that this child had lived far longer than biology alone would have allowed. That survival wasn't an accident. It was the result of consistent, intentional care from others. Think about what that required. Feeding when they couldn't feed themselves, keeping them warm during brutal winters, protecting them when predators prowled outside the cave. These were not quick acts of pity. They were long-term commitments. That level of effort reveals not just survival instinct, but deep emotional bonds. Even today, raising a child with special needs demands patience, love, and adaptability. Now imagine doing that without modern medicine. No soft beds, no guaranteed food. The fact that prehistoric parents still put in that effort speaks volumes about human nature. It suggests that early humans didn't just value the strong hunters or gatherers, they valued every member of the group. A child who may not have been able to hunt could still inspire care, love, and connection within the tribe. In many ways, these vulnerable children might have been some of the earliest teachers of empathy, shaping the social glue that held human groups together. Archaeologists often say that the true measure of humanity is not the first stone tool or the first fire, but the first evidence of care. Why? Because tools show intelligence, but care shows compassion. And in the case of individuals with Down syndrome in prehistory, The fossil record points directly to that compassion. Take, for instance, findings from prehistoric burials, where individuals with clear disabilities were laid to rest with the same ritual respect as others. This wasn't just about survival during life, it was about dignity in death. To bury someone, to place them in a resting place, sometimes with objects or in specific positions, reveals that prehistoric people saw value in every individual, regardless of ability. Now, here's the striking part. Caring for someone who couldn't contribute in traditional ways would have cost energy, food, and time. In harsh Ice Age conditions, those were precious resources. Yet groups still chose to give them. Why? Likely because the act of care itself strengthened the entire group. By learning to nurture the most vulnerable, early humans built deeper bonds, cooperation, and emotional intelligence, the very traits that allowed our species to thrive. So when we see bones of a child with Down syndrome who lived far longer than expected, or a burial where someone with disabilities was laid to rest carefully, we're not just seeing fossils, we're seeing proof of something bigger, the roots of empathy. In short, these traces remind us that humanity has never been only about the strongest surviving. It has always been about the group, about love, and about the instinct to protect one another, even when it required sacrifice. That instinct may be one of the oldest and most powerful survival tools we ever had. When we imagine prehistoric life, we often picture rugged hunters with spears or women gathering roots and berries. But that's only part of the story. Life in small tribes was about much more than hunting. It was about cooperation. And here's where people with Down syndrome may have fit into the prehistoric world in ways we don't always expect. In a group of 20, 30, or 40 individuals, every person mattered. While someone with Down syndrome may not have been able to chase a mammoth or carry heavy loads, there were countless other roles vital for survival. They could have helped watch over children while adults hunted, tended to fires, gathered smaller plants or firewood, or even participated in rituals and storytelling. Remember, prehistoric survival wasn't just physical, it was social. Keeping the group cohesive was as important as bringing back food. And here's the fascinating part. In many modern, small-scale societies, individuals with disabilities are often woven into daily life, not excluded from it. Their presence can strengthen bonds, create more patience in caregiving, and remind the group of values beyond brute strength. If this is true today, it's very likely that similar patterns existed tens of thousands of years ago. So, while the fossil record may not spell it out in detail, we can imagine a prehistoric child with Down syndrome sitting close to the fire, surrounded by siblings, learning simple but essential tasks, contributing in small but meaningful ways. Their role wasn't about being the strongest hunter, it was about being part of the heartbeat of the tribe. Now imagine this, a small Ice Age tribe huddled together in a cave as icy winds roar outside. Survival depends not only on food and fire, but on trust, compassion, and care. In this setting, someone with Down syndrome wasn't just left on their own. They were part of a tightly woven community where caregiving was a survival tool. Archaeological finds back this up. For example, skeletons from prehistoric times have been discovered showing signs of long-term disability, yet those individuals lived well into adulthood. This means others must have helped feed them, protect them, and even nurse them when they were sick or injured. That tells us something powerful. Compassion and caregiving were not modern inventions. They were deeply human instincts that go back tens of thousands of years. For someone with Down syndrome, this likely meant they had strong bonds with caretakers, parents, siblings, or even unrelated tribe members. The tribe may have adjusted to their pace, given them tasks suited to their abilities, or simply valued their presence as part of the group's identity. After all, every person was a reminder of connection, belonging, and continuity. And let's not forget the emotional side. People with Down syndrome are often described today as bringing warmth, joy, and a unique perspective to those around them. It's not hard to imagine the same being true in the prehistoric world, where a smile, a gentle presence, or a comforting gesture carried just as much weight as the strongest spear throw. In many ways, caregiving created stronger tribes, and individuals with disabilities were part of that strength. When we think of survival in prehistoric times, we often picture hunting mammoths or fending off predators. But survival was never just about brute strength. It was also about community balance: who gathered plants, who tended fires, who watched children, who remembered stories. In that system, people with Down syndrome likely found meaningful roles that fit their abilities. Not every member of the tribe needed to wield a spear. Some gathered roots, herbs, or firewood. Others kept fires burning through the night, a task critical to staying alive in freezing conditions. Even sitting near children, keeping them calm and safe, would have been invaluable to a group always facing danger. These smaller, quieter roles made a massive difference in daily survival. Anthropologists also point out that memory and storytelling were essential in early societies. Oral traditions passed down warnings, knowledge of hunting grounds, and spiritual beliefs. Someone with Down syndrome, especially if they had a natural gift for rhythm or communication, might have played a part in reinforcing stories or rituals. We often underestimate how prehistoric people valued emotional bonds. A tribe member who spread comfort, lightened heavy moments, or gave a sense of stability could be as important as a warrior. For a community constantly under stress, these contributions may have been cherished. So while life was undeniably harsh, roles were flexible. Each person contributed in their own way. And in that framework, prehistoric people with Down syndrome were not just passive dependents. They were participants in the rhythm of tribal life. Their presence wasn't just tolerated. It was part of what made the tribe whole. If we want to know how people with Down syndrome were treated in prehistoric times, the clearest evidence often comes from the ground itself. Burials, skeletons, and archaeological finds tell stories words cannot, and what they reveal is surprising, sometimes even heartwarming. In several archaeological sites, researchers have found skeletons of individuals who showed physical traits consistent with Down syndrome. What's striking is not just their existence, but their condition at death. Many of these individuals lived far longer than expected for their era. Some survived into adolescence or even adulthood, despite the immense challenges of prehistoric life. That longevity alone suggests care. Consider what survival required. Food had to be hunted or gathered, shelters built, fires maintained, predators avoided. Anyone unable to fully contribute to the most grueling tasks would need help from others. And yet these individuals lived. This means someone fed them, protected them, and ensured they weren't left behind. Even more telling are burial practices. Graves from the Paleolithic and Neolithic eras often show that individuals with visible differences were buried with the same respect as others, sometimes even with grave goods or decorations. That kind of treatment signals value, not rejection. It shows that prehistoric societies, far from being merciless, may have understood the worth of every member regardless of ability. The bones whisper a powerful truth: compassion is not modern. It has roots stretching back tens of thousands of years. The care given to those with Down syndrome was part of what made us human. Archaeology doesn't just reveal bones, it hints at roles people played within their communities. For individuals with Down syndrome, survival wasn't only about being carried along by the tribe. Evidence suggests they may have had unique valued places in society. Some anthropologists argue that individuals who couldn't hunt or fight may have contributed in other vital ways. In many indigenous cultures studied today, those less physically able often become knowledge keepers, storytellers, caregivers for children, or spiritual figures. Could the same have been true in prehistory? The parallels are compelling. Imagine a prehistoric group huddled around a fire. The hunters are gone, but the children need watching. The fire must be kept alive and stories must be told to pass down wisdom. Someone who wasn't out on the hunt could fill these roles. And if they brought joy, calm, or comfort to others, that in itself strengthened the group's resilience. What's fascinating is that prehistoric societies seem to recognize that every member mattered, not just for raw survival, but for the emotional glue that held people together. Human evolution wasn't only about sharper tools or bigger brains, it was about connection, care, and cooperation. So when we think of prehistoric people with Down syndrome, we shouldn't just picture them as dependent. They may have been loved family members, trusted companions, or even symbolic figures within the tribe. Their presence could have reinforced bonds, reminding everyone of their shared humanity. In short, survival wasn't just physical, it was social. And the inclusion of individuals with Down syndrome shows how deeply prehistoric people valued that truth. When we step back and look at the evidence, skeletons showing long lifespans, careful burials, and signs of protection, it becomes clear. Prehistoric societies weren't just surviving, they were caring. Individuals with Down syndrome lived well beyond the years they could have if left to fend for themselves. That fact alone tells us something profound about our ancestors. It tells us that empathy is not a modern invention. The instinct to nurture, to protect, to make room for someone different has been with us since the Ice Age. In fact, some scholars argue that compassion was one of humanity's greatest evolutionary advantages. Tribes that took care of their vulnerable members may have formed stronger bonds, which in turn made them more resilient against the brutal challenges of prehistoric life. And isn't that striking? In a world of predators, freezing nights, and constant hunger, people still chose to love. They chose to carry those who couldn't walk, to share food with those who couldn't hunt, to let life continue even when it demanded sacrifice. That choice helped shape who we are as a species. So when we ask, how were people with Down syndrome treated in prehistoric times? The answer is surprisingly hopeful. They were not simply cast aside. They were seen, they were valued, and in many cases they were cherished. Their survival is proof that humanity's story has always included kindness. The story of how people with Down syndrome were treated in prehistoric times challenges many of our assumptions about the distant past. Far from being cold or indifferent, early human societies demonstrated care, patience, and a deep sense of responsibility toward those who were different. Archaeological evidence shows us that survival wasn't just about strength, speed, or the ability to hunt. It was about connection, cooperation, and compassion. By choosing to protect and nurture their most vulnerable members, prehistoric communities revealed a truth that still defines humanity today. Our greatest strength has always been our ability to care for one another. Even in a harsh and unforgiving world, they made room for love.